Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
This April Fool's Day, we're bracing ourselves for the impact of the most foolish April Fool of them all. And I'm talking, of course, about Trump's tariffs, the scale and scope of which we will learn tomorrow. Not content with damaging his own economy, he has now got his sights set on ours too, and reportedly even within his own administration, there is no knowing yet what exactly he has planned. Indeed, he may not even know himself. In that context, I was glad that the Taoiseach responded positively to my request in scheduling a briefing last week for opposition leaders to hear from officials in his department about the likely impact of tariffs. And I want to thank the Taoiseach and his officials for what was a comprehensive but a deeply worrying briefing. Taoiseach, clearly we cannot take the threat of tariffs seriously enough. We know that a significant fall in exports to the US could mean significant job losses here, and we know how reliant the Exchequer is on corporation tax, a disproportionate amount of which is from the profits of US multinationals. Taoiseach, the place that we find ourselves in today reflects the risks that your party and Fine Gael have taken with the economy. First, in failing to diversify our economic base. Our economic model has clearly become over-reliant on a very small number of big American corporations, and that's widely acknowledged as a risk. Secondly, there's a serious risk to our economy because you've contrived to waste what has undoubtedly been a boom. Our eye-watering corporation tax gains have been squandered because your government did not use the money to invest in the sustainable infrastructure we so badly need: affordable housing, decent public transport, universal childcare, fit-for-purpose healthcare, and clean energy supplies. That's what we should have now in place here in Ireland, given the budgetary figures we've had. But instead, you favoured one-off measures in recent budgets, a few quid off skyrocketing electricity bills and a tiny amount towards spiralling rents, but nothing meaningful for those who need it so badly in a housing and a cost of living crisis. So Taoiseach, this is crunch time. And can you tell us today that your government's response to tariffs will prioritise public investment and targeted measures to help those who need it most? And will you act to safeguard jobs and livelihoods? We've welcomed the index linking of welfare payments. That's very good to see. But now is the time to prepare for potential job losses. Since the pandemic, we in Labour have been calling for a state-backed short-term wage subsidy scheme to protect workers during periods of uncertainty. It would work like the EWSS introduced during the pandemic. It's long been in place in countries like Germany, and we've termed it the Oberjahr scheme to subsidise employees, Taoiseach, to work shorter hours when companies encounter difficulties and provide access to upskilling programmes. It's a vital type of model to protect workers' dignity, to protect the livelihoods of families and households. So Taoiseach, will you commit to looking at our proposals for this short-term working scheme and give us a commitment that you'll respond to Trump's tariffs tomorrow with effective targeted measures to protect businesses but also families and struggling households?
Taoiseach.
First of all, níl áras é seo an ábhar is táchtaí a bheith go scór na dála seo agus go scór na tíre sna blianta atá roing. Níl éon áras ar sin bunatharú atá faoi chabadal ag údarás na Stáit Aontaithe agus Uachtarán na Stáit Aontaithe mar le tariffs agus cúrsaí trádála. Without question, this is a fundamental shift in US policy. Tariffs are bad. They're bad for the world. They will create instability, uncertainty, and a lack of predictability in the world economy. That will mean a pause in investment. Whatever about existing investments, decision makers are pausing their investment decisions pending this settling down. And that in itself will have a dampening effect on economic growth, not just globally, but across Europe and indeed in Ireland. The question of and it's clear that from what we understand so far, we're looking at a universal applicability of tariffs in terms of countries and in terms of goods. And obviously we have a number of sectors. The US administration are going to focus on 5 sectors. Semiconductors, wood, pharma, and automotive and so forth, which is having a big impact already in terms of some EU countries. But the key issue is Europe doesn't want tariffs and Europe wants negotiation. So Europe will take a strategic approach in its response. and that is as it should be. We will input into that response. We're part of the European Union, and we will input into that response in terms of what's the most effective strategic way to mitigate and reduce the impact of tariffs on Ireland and on Europe itself. Tariffs will increase inflation, will increase the cost of medication, will increase the cost of groceries in America in particular and elsewhere. I would reject your criticisms in terms of Ireland. Ireland has a broad base, both indigenous and multinational investment in Ireland and abroad. I mean, Irish companies are all over the world, and there's a connection. I mean, the FDI that came into Ireland spawned a lot of Irish-owned companies. A lot of Irish-owned companies that are now big, strong companies developed on the back of supply chains to the multinationals, particularly project management areas, particularly in terms of instrumentation. You take a company like Intel, or you take some of the pharmaceuticals, they're constructing plants all over the world. Very often you will find Irish companies in the supply chain to those companies. So it's far too simplistic to draw a distinction between the FDI sector and Ireland's SME sector. We need to diversify markets. We need to sign the CETA deal. I think you were opposed to the CETA deal. You had concerns. You were against it. And that was wrong. And our bread and butter is trade deals. And we should support CETA, and I appreciate your support when we bring the legislation to ratify that deal before the House. I appreciate that. I'll come back later next week.
Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, certainly I think we all agree in this House that the tariffs Trump is proposing are bad for the worldwide economy. Indeed, we could be facing an international Trump slump, as it has been described. And indeed, the fear of tariffs itself is having a destabilising effect across Ireland and across Europe. And, you know, I think we all appreciate that the EU has to respond in a strategic manner to whatever comes forward from the US tomorrow. But equally, here at home, we have to control the controllables. And your own finance minister has pointed out the need to invest in infrastructure. An acknowledgement, I think, that as is widely accepted, we simply don't have the critical public infrastructure that should be in place at this point in time, particularly in housing, as we all know. We all know that's the biggest crisis here at home facing this government. But Taoiseach, that's why we're offering a constructive proposal from Labour. We believe our Oireachtas scheme could be transformational. It could have made a huge difference during the previous recession. It would have enabled us to hold on to more of our construction workers, and that itself would have meant we could have delivered more homes. Indeed, we might even have been able to deliver 40,000 homes last year if we'd had a scheme that had enabled construction workers to stay in Ireland on the subsidised sort of scheme that we've seen in Germany. So, Taoiseach, will you review our scheme and look at it as a potential way to help households?
This is a different potential economic upheaval than the previous one. It's of a different structure and of a different nature. And I would say that we've provided for the Future Ireland Fund and the Climate Infrastructure and Nature Fund, which is providing substantial funding. We'll have 16 billion by the end of this year in the Future Ireland Fund. And whatever we do, we should try and maintain that as a protector of the future and for the generations who will require access to pensions and social protection and infrastructure, continuing investment in infrastructure. So we will be prioritising investment in infrastructure in terms of water, grid, in terms of digital transformation of health, in terms of public transport and so forth. In addition to that, Europe wants to double down on the single market, and I agree with President von der Leyen on this, and Ireland has to play its role in that because the single market has been good for Ireland. The Savings Investment Union is one that is being seriously pushed now by the EU, and Ireland will cooperate constructively in terms of arriving at a landing zone that benefits Ireland but benefits the wider European Union as well in respect of releasing savings to enable investment to take place in Europe to a far greater degree than is the case at the moment.
Now we move to Deputy.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.